Hello and welcome to another episode of Mormon Stories podcast. I am your host, Carah Burrell, and I'm really excited to be joining McKay Spartacus Johnson. Hey, McKay, for part 2 of our interview with him. And if you missed part 1, you can pause this and go back and listen to it. We discussed some of the traumatic things that happened to McKay on his mission to Brazil. So we are moving on from that part of his life and going to be jumping into, if you want to like kind of a quick overview, the kind of things that we're going to be talking about today are him going to BYU, finding his wife through mutual, and we're going to be talking about a lot of the purity culture things. And one of the most important things that I think is really interesting, if you listen to part 1, if you can imagine the type of like kind of homophobia that would kind of develop in a person's mind from what McKay experienced, it's going to be really interesting to hear how he was able to deconstruct some of those things, the homophobia. And I think everyone's in for a really, really interesting interview today. So McKay is just one of my favorite people. He's so witty and funny and intelligent. And then we're also going to get into him getting into TikTok and what that's been like. And not to mention, McKay's also a really talented musician, and we want to talk about his band and his music and the other things that he's passionate about and that he wants to push for. So, McKay, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here, guys.
Yeah, and then of course we cannot forget the what should I want to be like the Vanna White of Mormon Stories over here doing the switchboard. We have the one and only John Dillon. Hey, John.
Hi guys, welcome back, McKay.
Thank
you. Good
you.
to have you.
So good to have John riding sidecar. John is really sweet and wants to let me kind of develop my own style for doing interviews.
Is it sweet or smart? Or I see and know talent when I see it. Which is it?
I'm like, he takes pity on me by saying, why don't you go ahead and lead these interviews, Carah? No, I guess he is smart, strategic, and he wants me to develop my own style and my own, lead some interviews and stuff. So I'm really happy to get McKay in here for part 2. And I'm ready to jump into it. Is anything else you want to add, take away about what you think we're going to be talking about today?
No, that was an amazing intro. Wow, I'm blushing. Please stop. Keep going.
You should get blushing because I think my new nickname for you is going to be. You called yourself last time you were here like the Pasty Viking.
Oh yeah.
So add some color to your face with some blush. So so today we're going to be interviewing a pasty Viking named McKay. Everyone buckle up. So
oh man.
Like I was saying, we kind of just left off at McKay coming back from his mission and jumping into BYU. So what was your experience at like BYU? And if people don't know, do a quick overview of the culture, what it means to be a BYU student.
Yeah, absolutely. So first things first, I definitely did not look like this as a BYU student. Short hair, no beard. Yeah, this look would definitely get me kicked out. And so if you can imagine me without the long hair, without the beard, that's point A. Point B is that BYU, in my experience, was and still is very much focused on little rules like, the hair and beard thing and a ton of other things that we'll get into here. But yeah, so I got home from my mission July 2016, had about a month at home in Eagle Mountain, Utah, which is only like a 45-minute drive from BYU. So I was able to, get a job on campus working audio at events, which was really fun. I was actually with my sister who was just wrapping up her time there, and then started going on dates with girls again, which for a little bit felt weird, but didn't take me that long to, kiss someone. I think only a month. Maybe that is a long time, actually. And then, went down to the freshman housing and had one of my roommates was a friend from high school and a couple other random friends. We were all returned missionaries, and so it began. And I was there on scholarship for music.
Were you? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. For percussion performance at the time. I can tell you my high school grades definitely are not what got me into university. It was definitely my talent on the drums. And so I was lucky to have that. And I remember, getting to BYU, and it was really exciting. I dreamed of going to the Lord's University like my whole life, right? And within the first month, just starting to feel kind of this sinking feeling, and kind of this aversion to the culture of the campus, how the only way I could have described it was very Pharisaical in that, as I said before, they're very focused on the little things such as, is that guy's hair too long? Like, or, oh no, is that chick over there showing her shoulders? Heaven forbid. That is like so evil.
So people would be like murmuring and gossiping.
Oh, yeah.
About people who weren't following not only the Mormon rules, but then on top of that, like the BYU honor code rules.
Yes, exactly. Which are, a whole kind of next level step up from Mormon rules, and maybe not quite as intense as missionary rules, which I had just come home from in some ways. So, on the one hand, it didn't seem that much different, but at the same time, there were always these little things here and there that I was just kind of thinking like, that just doesn't sit right with me. On top of that, as anyone who's served a Mormon mission knows, you kind of go through this adjustment period for, it varies from person to person. For me, it was probably 3 to 4 months where I just kind of felt sad a lot of the time because I had gotten so used to that very rigorous, planned schedule of missionary life. And I had always and have always been very passionate about music. But here I was, finally in school, working on this major for the thing that I loved and feeling like I'm not helping people come to Jesus. Like maybe I don't want to do, music for a career. Maybe this is the wrong thing for me. And I took like some aptitude tests. And of course the results always came back the same. Like you have the most aptitude for the entertainment industry, you know? So that was kind of frustrating for a while.
Were you thinking of like, I should go into like the CES, like becoming a teacher to bring people to Christ? What were you thinking?
Yeah, actually the thought of becoming a seminary teacher did briefly cross my mind at one point. And, maybe I would have been a good teacher. I don't know. I had one ex-girlfriend who had randomly told me at some point, like, I think you'd be a good teacher. And that's probably just due to the fact that I generally don't have a problem with, speaking in front of people and whatnot.
And you were pretty orthodox, right, in your beliefs about Mormonism.
Yeah, fairly so.
Good at rule following.
Yeah, pretty.
And you were
pretty,
AP on your mission as well, right?
Exactly,
So.
yeah. And I was pretty rule following, yet at the same time, the degree to which BYU was so nitpicky with little rules, again, to me that seemed very pharisaical and like not what the Jesus that I loved represented. And so that definitely began some cognitive dissonance, which becomes important later on, but it was just kind of in the background at the time, just, another little item on the shelf, so to speak.
Yeah. Do you mind if I ask? Because I didn't go to BYU, but I did grow up in Provo.
Yeah.
Hey, John.
Yes.
May I ask you, because you always describe BYU as like going to Oz, right? And then
For
it
me,
kind of
growing up in Texas, yeah.
And then it was kind of, was it a letdown for you as well? Or do you feel like the same things that McKay was talking about?
For me, BYU really was like going to Oz.
Okay.
Yeah, I got
You
to
didn't
meet,
see that pharisaical nature?
I met Elder Holland. He was like a teacher of mine. When he was president of the university, I dated his daughter. I was in the honors dorms. I was like prostrating myself at the feet of Mormon apostles, and I was going to general conference every session that I could. Like all the devotionals, I would just get in the front row. And
So were you like the Pharisee that McKay is? Were you more of like that type, that you were more?
I never saw, like I went 4 years never seeing someone smoke or drink at BYU.
No, you weren't.
Never even seeing someone do that, let alone.
What about like
do it.
someone exposing their shoulders?
That
was a joke.
Yeah,
Somewhat of a joke. 'Cause sometimes-
Margie ran cross country.
Exactly. You'll see women not, but like, there, if you remember maybe in like 2012, there was that girl who took a picture of herself in the bathroom mirror at BYU because a man came up to her in the library and said that we all signed the honor code. Is this ringing a bell for anyone here?
Yeah.
And like we all signed the honor code, and you were disrespecting everyone and God by like she had like tights on and like a skirt that went to her knees.
That was like BYU Idaho, right?
No, that was BYU Provo.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I can confirm there were definitely during my time at BYU, and probably still are, things like that happen fairly frequently at BYU Provo, and I'm sure at BYU Idaho
For sure.
as well. No shade, BYU kids, love you, but it's the nature of the beast.
Right.
So yeah, in any case, that was just this struggle for me my whole time that I was there, even from just first arriving there and being a freshly returned missionary. And, I will say that I had some good times at BYU too. It wasn't like all just this awful, depressing, however many years of my life, but there was always in the background all these little things that were bugging me, and those would definitely come up later. And so, during that first semester of BYU, I was very focused on, trying to figure out my life. And eventually I came around and realized, no, music is what I still want to do. And in kind of my Mormon mindset at the time, I kind of thought I can still like bless people's lives and bring them the light of Christ or what have you with the power of rock and roll. And, in my kind of different mindset now, which we'll get into my beliefs currently and stuff later, but I still feel like music is a very powerful thing to really like uplift people, no matter the genre or whatever kind of message the music may or may not have, or even if it's just fun party music. Like people need those like serotonin dumps, people need to have fun times in life. If you don't, you're not living, you're just surviving.
So you had to go through like a phase of post-mission. I wonder how many people go through that. Like,
I would say every return missionary goes through something similar to that.
That you're like not making a meaningful change in the world the way you felt like you were every day on your mission.
Yeah.
You're like being selfish in your pursuits for music, and you have to find a way to like fit in your passions into the box of like, this will serve God, right?
Yes, exactly. So, and beyond that too, I was also kind of struggling with the whole dating thing, because prior to leaving on my mission, I had been in a really serious relationship with my high school girlfriend. And when I got home, she was on her mission at the time. And so we had kind of promised each other, like, well, we're not going to wait for each other, but if we're both around when each of us are home, we'll pick it back up and see what happens. And so I was like any good return missionary BYU guy does, going on lots of dates with lots of girls and having fun, but not really connecting with anyone and not really feeling like anything was sticking. And I eventually, started like praying about it. And I remember going into that first general conference home, I like specifically asked God, like, do I need to wait for her, and see what happens? And I didn't get any answers via general conference talks, but then the next Monday, she sent me an email saying she was transferring to BYU. And I was like, hallelujah. That was the answer, right? And that was further like cemented in my mind when a couple months later, she wrote me another email saying like, hey, I know that I kind of messed things up, because she did kind of Dear John me while I was out on my mission. And she was all kind of like in this email, probably about 4 months before she came home. So now we're in like January of 2017. She was like, I still love you. Literally those words. And I don't know if you're open to it, but I would love to try again. And of course, hormonal, lonely Mormon me, who my whole thought process at the time is I need to find my eternal companion, was just elated, ecstatic, exuberant at that email, and immediately, responded like, I still love you too, and I've been praying about this. And I think I probably was like actually crying.
Because you said earlier that your patriarchal blessing,
yes,
just everything in your life is kind of focused at that point when you're a BYU student on finding your eternal companion, being a father, being a husband.
Yeah, there was a line in my patriarchal blessing, which I received at the age of 12 years old. So this is like how far back kind of that indoctrination goes. The line said something to the effect of the greatest calling you have received in your life will be to be a loving husband and father in Zion as you, and then it listed a bunch of attributes which are kind of universal, like being patient and loving and stuff, right? And, so of course, as a kid, being very impressionable, I definitely took that to heart all through my teen years, and then going into my adult years where I'm like, oh shit, now this can be like a real thing. I could actually like, go to the temple and marry someone for time and all eternity and have a family. And honestly, it was to the point where on my mission before coming home, our mission president had us set some personal goals as to like what we were going to do, with our time once we got back. And they needed to be like some spiritual ones, some just kind of life career ones, and maybe some financial ones as well. I can't remember exactly. But I do remember one of my spiritual ones was, get engaged by December 2016, which is, wow, looking back on that, I'm like, oh, young McKay,
so many things you just can't force. Like
exactly. Yeah. Can't force that. It takes two. And also it's just like that kind of thing takes a lot more than, or it should take more time than, 6 months. I got back in July and had that goal to be engaged by that December. Oh, hell, that's only 5 months.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I can hear people who this is like the first Mormon stories they've ever heard or don't know anything about Mormon culture. They're like, oh, that sounds crazy. But anyone who's like in a Christian or Mormon culture is like, yep.
That's like what you're supposed to do. It's like
standard,
normal,
right? Like,
which is something that I hope can change
Exactly.
because, as we'll get into, I found that to be incredibly harmful to me, and I've seen it be harmful to a lot of other people that I know, actually, as well, in both in the Mormon Church and in other faiths as well.
yeah, I
So-
mean, I'm 32 years old, and I just discovered like this year that I can probably do more than be a mom and a wife. So
Yeah,
I'm still deconstructing
I saw,
like
I
that
saw you on your
patriarchal stuff.
Instagram stories picking up that saxophone again.
Oh
Carah.
yeah, I'm a little musician myself. This isn't about me though, and my super intense saxophone talent. That's sarcasm. Anyway, so you're able to get back with your high school girlfriend.
Yeah.
And now you're happily married and everything's fine, right? No, okay, what happened?
Oh boy. Yeah, not exactly. She's happily married to someone else.
To you? People are getting
Spoiler.
annoyed by my sarcasm, and I've only started. We're like 10 minutes in. I'm so
Stick
sorry.
with the chronology here. We're getting out of chronology.
Oh, sorry about that. But yeah, so basically she sent me that email January of 2017. I'm like totally ecstatic. And I basically from that point forward, I'm like, okay, she's got 4 months until she comes home. I'm just going to wait for her now. And so I didn't go on any more dates for that whole second semester that I was at BYU. And I like even had like a Twitter countdown that like I was so like invested in this, right? She gets home in April of 2017. The day after she gets home and she's been released and whatnot, we go out on a date and it's like wonderful and we kiss and the sparks are flying and I just feel like this is it. Finally, we're going to finally get married and live happily ever after. And we date for about a month and she dumps me. Well, first she friend zoned me, then kind of started slowly ghosting me over a month until one night I call her like in May, late May, almost June. And I'm like, what is going on? And she's just like, I'm sorry. I'm like, moving on. And of course I was upset by that. And I was like, I don't think I want to talk to you for a while or like really even be friends. For the record now, zero ill will towards her or her current hubs. They're lovely people. You know, it was just a painful thing to go through. And I think part of that definitely resulted from the culture, not only pressuring me to try and find an eternal companion, but also pressuring her into that and like feeling all that, both of us probably feeling all this pressure that as soon as she got home, we needed to just start seriously dating. And whereas the reality is for someone to adjust from a Mormon mission, it takes time, you know? And not only that, but you're just getting back into, or for me, just starting college, and it takes time to figure yourself out and to figure out what you want to do with your studies and your career and just be a single adult for a while, you know, instead of just jumping right into marriage and kids and whatnot. And honestly, that was another thing that kind of led to some cognitive dissonance for me. That whole summer of 2017, I was starting to feel maybe a little bitter, a little angry towards God, because I was like, yo, dude, I'm doing everything right as far as I know. Like I served a mission, came home, and all these bad things are happening because aside from that, I had some injuries that happened to me that year, and so I had to get a couple surgeries that summer, and it was just kind of, you know, a tough time. And I was feeling pretty down, but I was able to come back from it eventually. And the next year at BYU, for the most part, was a lot better. I had this new roommate who we became super tight, really close friends. Shout out to Chaz. He knows who he is. We're still good friends to this day. Love him.
Especially if his name is Chaz.
Yes. Yeah.
Chaz knows who he is.
You know, this is probably the time where I was, I guess I would say maybe at like the height of my faith in the LDS church.
Meaning like you were super devout and
being
doing
super
everything
devout,
you're
super
supposed to do.
gung ho, like had a calling in our YSA ward, and was just, you know, really, really loving it and really all about it. And I was still like very actively, you know, searching for the one, quote unquote. And at the same time in the background, struggling with that BYU culture that just never sat well with me. And again, it felt like it was so nitpicky about teeny little rules that I was like, this doesn't really matter to someone's eternal salvation. Beyond just the religious context, these things don't matter to whether or not someone is a good person, you know. And really important side note, actually, fall of that year, 2017, the Me Too movement happened. And that was where I finally recognized, oh my God, I was sexually abused on my mission. And, I feel I would be remiss if I didn't mention something about that, because not only did it open my eyes to all those things that had happened in my own life, but it also opened my eyes to how many women I know and knew at the time, including like pretty much every woman I am related to, have all gone through some form of sexual assault or sexual abuse. And that was really saddening to me. And these are people both in and out of the church. And I was like, it kind of shocked me. I was like, surely in the church, this kind of thing would not happen. But there it was. And all these women posting hashtag me too. And some of them telling their story, some of them just posting the hashtag. And I made a little post at the time. I didn't want to take the spotlight away from women, but I, just said, I've been shocked and my eyes have been opened today. And I'm so sorry. Want you to know that I'm a safe person to talk to if you ever need to. And also me too. And I just kind of left it at that at the time. And that slowly opened the door for me to be able to, over the ensuing years, start talking about my experiences with sexual assault, but it still took me a while. And I didn't at the time think, I should probably go to therapy for these things. But that did happen eventually. And now currently, going strong in therapy, it's great. I highly recommend it for anyone who has not done it yet. But so that happened. And then if we kind of fast forward to the spring of 2018, I was going on lots of dates, a lot of BYU dates, a lot of derfing.
I want to know. Everyone's like, wait, pause. Please define. So wait, you're going on lots of dates at BYU. You're like, some of these rules, they seem a little bit pharisaical here. Let me try out this derfing. Please elaborate.
Well, so for those who don't know, derfing, a.k.a. Levi Lovin', a.k.a. the Provo Push, a.k.a. dry humping.
This is a good also time to mention content warning. What's our content rating for this episode, John?
I think some F-bombs were dropped last episode, so it's at least PG-13, maybe.
And now back to the story.
Yeah.
If you're not into, mature subjects, and maybe a little bit of, mature sexual content, turn it off.
Yeah, that's a part.
Like a light switch.
There's, so much of like being a human is sexuality, and like the church, I feel like, is muzzled so much of that about talking about it. So I like to let people tell their story exactly how they want to, and a lot of McKay's has to do with sexual trauma, especially in the last episode, and then also navigating the derfing scene at BYU. And
marriage and eventual other things having to do with sexual trauma. So
yeah. Oh, this wasn't just an episode about derfing? We're going to get into other things is what you're saying. Interesting. Okay. Here, look at the outline. That is so. Anyway, I was going to spend a whole hour on this. That's another joke. Anyway, so Levi Loving is more what I've heard of it. Derfing is almost like a new term.
Yeah, they're all different terms for the same thing, which is basically you're rubbing up against each other in order to produce sexual sensations to the point of even like climaxing, but you have your clothes on. And I feel like a lot of Mormon young adults will kind of justify it as being like, well, it's not expressly like forbidden per se, but also, I feel like it just kind of naturally happens because when you have people who have a lot of chemistry and are attracted to each other, and if they start kissing or making out, and then they have all these arbitrary rules of, but you can't, go too far, you can't touch each other in any of your sexual areas, like, these things kind of start happening, right? Yeah. That without being too explicit, just like that motion is like it comes naturally to people. At least that was my experience with it. Like I never, started making out with a girl and thought like, I think we're going to derf,
Yeah.
But so anyways, that's definitely a thing.
Like kind of getting around the rules.
Yep.
I don't know if that's like expressly against the honor code, but I would assume so. Like that you're not supposed to arouse sexual feelings in another person.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you a lot of BYU students do it just because, not just because I know I did it several times, but I mean, there are all those girls I did it with, and also a lot of guys and girls that I knew and know, have told stories to me about it. So it's not like an unusual thing per se. And there were a few times where I like kind of felt bad, and I went in and confessed to my bishop, and they were
did you?
And yeah, they were for the most part just like, okay, well, don't do it again. Maybe don't take the sacrament just this one Sunday. But generally, they're so funny with the rules. They're like, well, did you touch her breast with your hand or genital region? And if you hadn't touched with your hand, then it's like, well, just be careful. Don't do it the next time. So anyways, I digress. That was kind of a thing all throughout my time at BYU, and for a lot of people who go there, and just Mormon young adults in general, I feel like. But in May of 2018, I went on a date with a girl who I met via Mutual, which is Mormon Tinder, basically, for those who don't know.
It's like DoorDash for derfing.
It definitely can be, but I was reaching a point where I was like, I really want to find someone to marry. Like, I was finally kind of recovering from that bad breakup with the ex-girlfriend, and was like, I think my derfing days are done. I want a date to marry.
The prodigal child is back.
Yeah.
No more of that.
Well, and so I went on a date with this girl, and of course, we ended up making out on that first date. Not derfing, though. That came later. And I remember actually stopping her, mid make-out session. I was like, wait, I don't want this to just be like a one and done type of thing. I actually like you. On the first date, determining, I already really like this girl for her personality that I've experienced for all of 3 hours, and probably less than that, because half of that would have been just making out, but, and she was like, no, I've never done this before. I want to like date you as well. And I was like, okay. We went on a second date and made our relationship official on our second date. And she told me she loved me on our second date, and naive McKay said, I love you back.
Did you really? Like,
I did. And
she had like all this programming of like, we got a first date, I love you, ring by spring. Like all of that is kind of like programmed in. You got to follow the schedule.
And I think it was almost this feeling of maybe, well, definitely pressure, maybe a bit of desperation in both of us to like, get on with the program and get married, right? Like a good Mormon young adult is supposed to do. And actually, I remember us having a conversation on that second date where we talked about something to the effect of like, I feel like I've known you for a lot longer than I've actually known you. Basically hinting at, I think we knew each other in the pre-existence, baby. Like,
that's why it's going so fast.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we already know each other.
Yeah.
They don't know about our love. We were probably already like best friends in heaven before this.
They don't understand us. We're meant to be together.
I know this conversation well because I had it too. So. Anyway,
thank you for validating that, Carah. It's
and another thing I know pretty well is being in Provo, Utah, and getting married really quickly. While you still love I love my husband still, but you have to admit, there's a horniness that comes into play that speeds things along. Was that your experience?
100%, because as a Mormon youth or young adult, you're not supposed to have sex. The only way you can achieve that is by being married, unless you want to break the rules and commit the sin second only to murder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's serious. You have to lock it down. You have to get married as soon as humanly possible, and these fast engagements are, I don't want to condemn one way or another that people choose to get married, but we do have to like have a conversation about the way that there's a certain way that you can express yourself sexually. I think you just said achieved sexuality.
That's kind of what it felt.
Sex.
That's kind of what it felt like. Like for Mormon guys and gals growing up, it's like, oh, I can't wait till the day where I'm married.
Yeah.
So I can have sex. Like,
it is. It's a hot topic of your brain pretty much at all times.
Yep.
Achieve sex kind of sounds like that Lonely Island song of like, I just had sex. If you put it through like a Google Translate and it came back. If you put it through like
achieved
I just achieved sex or something. So it's like an achievement. Like it's a new level that you've unlocked, and it's always on your young Mormon brain. And so it kind of clouds your vision, but
For sure. There's that, and then just the pressure of, in order to achieve the highest level of Mormon heaven, you have exaltation, right? You have to be married and like have kids and have eternal increase and whatnot. So there's all those kind of different pressures like that are put into this pressure cooker that is Mormon, Provo, BYU dating. And to make a long story short, we dated for about 2 months, and we're already seriously talking about, we know that we're going to get married. And I'm like, well, shoot, I'd better start saving for a ring. And I had a talk with her dad, and we'd only been dating for 2 months at this point. And her dad, to his credit in this instance, is kind of like, I'm not saying no, but don't you think you guys want to like get to know each other a little bit better first? And
good for him.
Yeah, good for him. But we were young and headstrong, and kind of wouldn't take no for an answer. So we kept dating for a while, and I just kind of quietly in the background kept working and saving for a ring. Eventually bought said ring. Now we'd be getting into late July, early August of 2018, and started kind of making plans to actually propose to her. Went to her parents again and talked with them again. And this time they were, a lot more kind of supportive and gung-ho. And we're like,
what did they think of you? Because you sounded like you were quite the good, righteous priesthood holder. And that's kind of what every parent wants for their daughter.
Yeah.
I feel like they can like hand her over.
Yeah, exactly.
So they must have liked you.
Yeah, well, in that sense, they did at the time. As far as like I kind of fit the mold of returned missionary, priesthood holder, living righteously, air quotes.
Right, air quotes. Like, I mean... was there something else going on underlyingly, or were you actually
not
living
yet,
up to the LDS
for the most
standards?
part I was, but I mean, like, I just say air quotes because I feel like the term living righteously is so, I don't know, kind of hypocritical, because at the end of the day, like...
What does righteous mean?
Yeah, what does righteous mean? And also no one is perfect, and everyone from the top down in any religion or outside of any religion does things that according to their moral code are like... wrong from time to time, right? Also, just the whole idea and concept of righteousness is something that I don't necessarily agree with anymore. We don't need to get into that right now, though. But of course, in the background too, there was derfing. After a couple months of dating, we were totally starting to do that.
Really?
And then,
okay.
Yeah.
Were you able to like hold off and keep that under control and get your temple recommends, or how did everything lead up
for a time?
Your marriage?
So in August is when I finally had the ring, August of 2018, and I talked with her parents, and then about a week and a half later or a week later, I can't remember exactly. I know the date was August 31st, 2018. I proposed to her, brought her to Bridal Veil Falls in Provo, which is where we had part of our first date. Had some friends lay out like some candles and rose petals and a table with a nice bottle of Martinelli's, non-alcoholic, of course. And I played "Marry Me" by Train for her on guitar and sang, and then got on one knee, the whole 9 yards. And we got engaged and, started preparing to be wed in earnest. And originally we had thought, we'll probably get married after Christmas. But then after lots of kind of stressful talks with her family and my family and between us, we decided to bring that date forward to November. And about a month before our wedding date, we're engaged, we're hanging out one evening, things are getting a little hot and heavy, and we ended up having sex. So this is a big no-no for non-married Mormon couples, right?
And did you repent? What did you go to the bishop? Did you keep it a secret?
Neither of us felt guilty.
Really?
At all.
That's actually quite surprising, given all that conditioning.
Well,
maybe you're just like, this felt normal. What did you think?
Well, yeah, it felt normal. It felt natural. We were very much in love. And we, obviously we had a lot of chemistry. and attraction for one another. And I mean, the thought crossed my mind a couple times while we were doing it, like, shouldn't be doing this. But then I was like, oh, but we love each other. It's okay. And afterwards, it was fine. And then we were kind of dating semi-long distance at the time. She was going to another school a couple hours away, so we'd switch off weekends visiting. And so I went up to visit her the next weekend after the first time we had sex, and we had sex again more times, and again, didn't really feel super guilty.
Is that how she described it as well? That like she didn't feel guilty either?
So at the time, yeah, but then later, there's one time where, once again, this is probably only a couple weeks before the wedding, we're having sex, and then afterwards she started crying, and I'm like, did I do something wrong? Like, what's up? And she's just like, my parents can't find out. They will kick me out. They will disown me. Like, these are very real fears that she had. And I think that I kind of had too, but that I hadn't really maybe given much thought towards, because I just figured no one's going to know. We love each other. We're not going to tell anyone. And she was having those thoughts, but I was willing at that time. I was like, well, maybe we should talk to, my bishop or your bishop or whatever. And she was like, no one can know. No one can find out.
Because you would have had to what? Like,
well, aside from definitely not getting married in the temple, possibly like delaying the wedding or whatever. And she had these very real fears of her parents, like, legit disowning her, probably intensely shaming her, and just the shame that we would have felt as people, as a couple, for, committing this quote unquote sin next to murder by having sex with each other before getting married. Right. And,
yeah, those are some huge consequences.
Exactly.
There's a lot on the line.
Yeah. It's a lot of intense cultural and social pressure, and this whole, salvation thing going on, where, like, if you don't take care of this sin, like, you're going to be damned to hell, basically, was the thought process there. And so we just didn't tell anybody. And late November came, and we got married in the temple, and kind of told each other, well, we'll talk with our bishop about it later. Right? And so,
can I ask one small question? Because you had already gone through the temple. She had already gone through the temple.
Yep.
You were both, endowed members who had made these covenants already.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, especially women like me, like, I didn't go through the temple until like a week before I was married. So if a couple were to, let's say they're engaged and they have a temple date planned, like, one of them is committing maybe more of an egregious sin, would you say, in your opinion? Like, if only one person's like made the covenants and that they're wearing their garments, but since both of you, did you feel more weight because you had made your temple covenants and you were breaking them?
Yeah. And actually, thank you for bringing that up. I'd honestly kind of forgotten about that aspect to it. Yeah, definitely. We were both endowed, both returned missionaries. So it was like kind of a double whammy of like, ooh, we have more light and knowledge. Like, if we, are caught, or if we tell someone about this, it's going to be like a huge, terrible thing. We could be like disfellowshipped or excommunicated, maybe, who knows? I do remember some of those thoughts going through my mind, and I'm sure through hers as well. But at the same time, this was creating a ton of cognitive dissonance for me, because, again, we were two young people in love, consenting adults. Why was us having sex an issue, and why was us having sex something that we needed to talk with some random old man who doesn't know us about? Doesn't make sense. Didn't make sense to me back then, even though that's kind of what I had been brought up believing. And then once we passed the point where we had sex a few times, and, all those kind of bonding hormones are released, and you kind of love the person even more, it made less sense, like, why anyone else should be involved in that aspect of our lives.
Were you concerned about like her getting pregnant earlier than than your wedding date, or
there was a little bit of concern about that, but I think if I remember correctly, I don't think we did it for the first time until after she had like begun her birth control, which, you know, a lot of Mormon women, they'll start their birth control like maybe a month or so before getting married, right? And so because of that, and, you know, we were adults in our early 20s. We knew a little bit about contraception, so we took care of that aspect of it. Wasn't too worried about that. There was that worry, though, for sure, but not a whole ton, I guess. But yeah, that would have been another thing that would have added to the kind of shame and fear if that had happened, right? But yeah, so this was all happening. We got married November 20th, 2018. I'll never be able to forget that date.
Was it a good day?
You know, it was kind of your classic Mormon wedding. You have all your friends and family there. You go to the temple and do the actual ceremony and whatnot. And I definitely cried during that. And then you had a big party, big reception, a lot of dancing. Me and my groomsmen did a choreographed garter toss dance to the tune of Sexy Back by Justin Timberlake.
I would expect no less.
Yeah, of course.
Of course
right?
You did, McKay. Great.
Of course, there's no footage of it either, though, so that's
dang.
unfortunate. But yeah, we got married and started living that good old Mormon married life, and for a while, you know, things were just hunky-dory. But after a couple months, we both started kind of feeling that guilt and shame again from the fact that we had had sex before getting married and never told anyone. And that built up over the period of a couple months to the point where we even, we had a couple like arguments or something about it. It led to some tension in our marriage. And we assumed like at the time, oh, this is because the spirit has left us because we have this sin that we haven't confessed, right? That was definitely the thought process at the time. And so eventually we set an appointment with the bishop of our married ward at the time at BYU and went and confessed to him that we had done that. And, you know, I feel like in terms of bishops that I had during my time in the church throughout my life, I kind of lucked out. I've heard some people previously interviewed on this podcast talk about bishop roulette, and I think I definitely kind of won that game. I never had a bishop that was super rude or super shaming, but I know there are plenty of them out there, unfortunately, and that's why it's bishop roulette, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, from my point of view now, it's still weird and wrong for adults to be talking about their intimate sexual lives with someone who's not like a qualified therapist or like a close family member, you know, just this kind of random person who's been called to this church leadership capacity. And you basically have to discuss and disclose intimate details of your sex life to them, right? And so that's what we did. We told them about, you know, how we had sex before getting married several times during the last like month or so of our engagement, and you know, we were both feeling pretty intense levels of shame for sure. I remember her crying. There was, I think,
in the bishop's interview that she was crying. Oh,
yeah.
wow. Okay.
There's one point in the interview too where, and I still don't know exactly why for this part, but there's a part where he talked with just her alone and not me, and I don't remember them talking with just me alone. Not sure. You know, I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt, and maybe they were asking her like, was it all consensual and stuff? But as my story reflects, men can be sexually abused too, so maybe they should also, if they're doing that, maybe they should also ask the man that separately. But this goes back to my point of I don't think they should be asking any of these questions at all, right? So to adults, and especially not to kids.
Right on. And what is so if somebody gets married in the temple, you can't undo a sealing. You can't take back a marriage. The sealing is done.
Yep.
But if you had, you know, this egregious sin of premarital sex, what is the punishment that your bishop doled out, I guess?
Well, so we had to go through what's called a church disciplinary council. And
other people had to be brought in?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
And we had to recount all those experiences to those people as well, which, you know, added to the shame and the guilt, and especially for for my wife at the time, like she was definitely feeling all those things very intensely, because it's four guys plus me asking us these questions and asking her these questions, and she's the only woman in that room. And I can't imagine how scary that must have been for her, because it was already pretty scary and traumatizing for me, you know? This, again, made me feel more cognitive dissonance, thinking, why is this a problem? We're consenting adults. We love each other. Why? Why are these guys we don't even know privy to all these details about our sex life? It started really becoming a big crack in my shelf, because I was like, this doesn't add up. Simultaneously, while that was cracking my shelf, another thing was going on at BYU, which was the Restore Honor movement, which was basically a series of protests and Instagram posts where people were bringing light to some problems that the BYU Honor Code had, not least of which was punishing sexual assault survivors for being sexually assaulted, but saying, oh, it's your fault because you were in this guy's room, basically, that kind of thing. And I was involved in that and realizing, like, yeah, this really is an issue, and the BYU Honor Code and the Pharisaical way of doing things here at BYU has never sat well with me. And so I attended that protest, or there were a couple actually, and was following closely with that and was signing petitions advocating for change with the Honor Code at BYU. And I guess at this point I was kind of becoming what we call a progressive Mormon, so to speak, where, not all of my views aligned 100% with everything that, certainly not with everything that BYU was putting down, and not even everything that like the general authorities would say and or do, like in their general conference addresses.
What do you attribute that to?
It's tough to put a finger on any one thing, Carah, that would have made me start becoming more progressive in that sense with the church. But I think a big part of it would just be having lived more life experience and starting to think a bit outside of the box of Mormonism, and think like, well, how does this thing make other people feel? And how do other people in other religions feel about this thing that Mormonism does or teaches, or, whatever. And it's starting to have more empathy, I think, for other groups other than my own kind of white Mormon male group was definitely a big part of my mind kind of opening and becoming more progressive in some of my ideas in regards to Mormon teachings and kind of protesting against the BYU Honor Code. And
because those protests that Restore Honor were BYU students kind of rising up, wanting to stay BYU students, but asking for more charity and for the people who have been victims of abuse, and just calling out.
And separation of like the Title IX office and the Honor Code office, and the assurance that if someone...
And the police.
Yes. Also the BYU police. Thank you for mentioning that, John. I have no great love for those guys. They gave me a lot of parking tickets during my time there. But jokes aside, they did some pretty unethical things, which I think you're about to bring up.
I mean, police officers shouldn't be, reporting things back to the university and the church.
Exactly.
Of the victims potentially of sexual assault. Right?
Yeah. And all that kind of stuff was happening.
Really scary that, if you were sexually assaulted, in BYU housing, is that what you're kind of trying to say, is like you report that to the police, the BYU police? Is that who comes to the house, and then they can let the school know? You can potentially get kicked out of the school because you were sexually assaulted while you were maybe had a beer or something. Like all of it ties together.
If the police ask what time the assault happened and you say 2 a.m., that you're incriminating yourself with the Honor Code office.
Yep.
Because you had a male in your dorm past the time you're allowed. And so then the university can kick you out for being raped. And so that disincents rape victims to report the rape or the assault, because then the police might go and tell the university, which will then tell your church, which will then get you kicked out.
Yep, and that happened to a lot of people. Priorities. Didn't happen to me specifically, but I mean the account Honor Code Stories on Instagram. Highly recommend people following that if they want to read more of these.
And this story won the Salt Lake Tribune a Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah.
Because the Salt Lake Tribune covered this. And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's how big of a story this was.
Yep. It was a pretty big thing. And I mean, add to the fact that I was kind of being progressive with all these beliefs and protests. I was also kind of being a little edgy and growing my hair out at the time. And
as a BYU student?
Yeah, not super long like it is now, but it was, just a little over the years and starting to curl up a little. And they just allowed Coke on campus at the time. So it felt like these big changes are happening. Maybe
the changes are happening. Rape victims are being heard and they're serving Coke finally. Like
BYU.
One thing at a time.
It's almost like dogs and cats sleeping together. No, you could for a century you couldn't get a caffeinated beverage on campus.
It's true, yeah.
I couldn't. It was all decaffeinated Coke. Decaffeinated Dr. Pepper.
Yeah, that's why there was even a business on campus for a while called Caffeine Corner.
Who we featured on Mormon Stories podcast.
Yes, who I will also talk about in just a minute here. One of my good friends. But before we get to that point, so that semester, this would be spring 2019 now of BYU ended. And again, still enjoying married life, being more of a progressive Mormon. Went on a bunch of trips that summer together, and I felt like our marriage was really strong and things were going well. Yet at the same time, there was all this dissonance going on from the disciplinary council that we had just been through, all the Restore Honor movement, which was really highlighting and bringing to the front of my mind all the issues that I had always had with BYU since starting there.
And that's got to be frustrating that it takes protests to get, anything to the forefront. That it's not BYU, like you're saying, like the Lord's University. Like, why are these things even a problem to begin with? That there's just all these problems already at BYU.
Exactly.
That people need to have protests over, that the church will fight against. Like these things that shouldn't even exist. That's got to be super frustrating.
Yeah, no, it was incredibly frustrating for me, even as a very active, devout, believing member of the church, right? And beyond that, oh shoot, I'm drawing a blank here.
We're enjoying married life.
Oh yeah, we were enjoying. Sorry, we were enjoying. No, we were.
Okay.
But I also was seeing a lot of people that I knew, including some close friends, leaving the church, and that was, causing me to question some things. And I would, I was the kind of Mormon where I would engage with these people on their Facebook posts and kind of bear my testimony or whatever.
You were one of those?
I mean, in my mind, I was being loving, but yeah, yes. I look back on that and I kind of cringe inwardly and I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry.
That AP from your mission, still alive and well at BYU, bearing your testimony on Facebook.
Yeah. Summer 2019, doing a lot of that. I had one friend who posted an article about elevation emotion. And I took issue with that. I was like, I know I have felt the Spirit many times in my life. And he didn't even argue back. He was like, I'm sure you have, but this article is also, saying this. And the two things don't necessarily have to be mutually exclusive. And I remember being very defensive in that comment section, but kind of being rattled to my core underneath and just thinking that over for days and losing sleep over it and starting to question my very basic notions of belief in God and Jesus and being guided by the Holy Spirit, And also during this time, I was occasionally looking at pornography. It was kind of something that we had addressed when me and my wife were dating, and I had quit cold turkey because I was so addicted. I had looked at it twice during the time we were dating.
So that's another, in quotes, addicted. Yeah. Just want to make sure the listeners can hear that. The church will literally be like, oh, you're addicted. You need to go to rehab.
Yeah, which is what I did. I went to the church's 12-step meetings for most of the time we were dating and stuff, and was doing really good in the sense of cold turkey, not looking at pornography, not masturbating, any of that, right? But after about 6 or 7 or so months of marriage, I was occasionally looking at it again. And that started building up some more, guilt and shame inside of me. And I was like, oh, she's going to be so mad if I tell her, but I need to tell her, I want to be honest. I want to be a good husband. And so by fall of 2019, things were to a point internally for me where I was like, I can't keep on doing this, I feel kind of two-faced. I need to talk to her and tell her, right? And I told her, and this was just a couple weeks shy of our first wedding anniversary, and it just devastated her, shook her to her core, and her reaction was pretty devastating to me as well.
Because what is, to like a Mormon woman, to a wife in that situation, what is she kind of thinking? Like, what is the explicit or implicit message she's getting now?
She's thinking, you're a monster. You don't love me. I'm not enough. My body isn't beautiful to you. She's thinking.
Is any of that true whatsoever?
No, heavens, no. I
but to a woman's credit, yeah, like those are a lot of the messages that you'll get that like that is what that means. But to a man who's actually the one looking at porn, like, you're here to tell us none of those things are actually true or connect.
None of those things are true at all. And it's really unfortunate that in the church there's such this culture that stems from the church's chastity teachings that, kind of shames women for if they dress immodestly and calls them basically sluts for that or whatever. And then on the flip side of that coin is it does also harm men, where if you do something that's pretty normal, like you masturbate once or even just a couple times, very infrequently, or if you, heaven forbid, happen to look at porn, you suddenly become the scum of the earth, lowest of the low, sex monster. You're probably going to molest kids one day or something. Like, these are all messages that I heard at various times growing up. Like, porn leads to porn leads to, sexual predators, or porn leads to, the most ridiculous one I've ever heard is that porn leads to people becoming serial killers. And actually,
all inhibitions out the window.
And I think that was taken from, there was some interview with Ted Bundy after he was, caught and waiting to die in a Florida prison, where they were interviewing him and asking him things like, what got you into like killing people? And the guy was psycho. He was a serial killer. He was just pulling stuff out of his ass to please the media. And so he said something about like, I think it started with looking at hardcore pornography or whatever. And it's just like, people, look, I'm 25 years old. I've looked at a decent amount of porn in my day. And I can tell you the urge or thought to brutally murder another human being has not crossed my mind even once, nor has the urge or feeling to molest children or anything that is inherently wrong like that.
It's one of my favorite fallacious reasonings. Oh man, that's
rough. It's completely bonkers how,
like, Hitler used toilet paper, I use toilet paper, I'm a Nazi.
No, it's such a false equivalency. It's so fallacious. So, but yeah, that was basically, that's the messaging that you're kind of brought up with, that I certainly was kind of brought up with in the church, and that she obviously was, because as soon as I tell her I've looked at some pornography, and with the caveat, I am so sorry, I love you, I want to change, I want to stop, yada, 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 she basically didn't hear anything beyond, I've looked at pornography, and that, would have internally sent all those messages that we were just talking about to her. And she became very, very upset. And, that night we're like still sleeping in the same bed, but she's like, don't touch me, get away from me, kind of thing. And the next morning she called her dad, and told him all about it. And he came over, and we all, had a nice little chat.
So your wife wanted to involve now your in-laws. I cannot be. How did it turn out? Well, what?
Well, she separated from me that next day.
From just admitting that you've looked at porn a handful of times.
And then she, took a few days where she was up living at her mom's house, and she was like thinking things over. And then I came up a few days later to talk, and she had like talked with her uncle, who's a lawyer, and had like a list of questions for me. And overall, very shaming experience. I was feeling like I wanted to die pretty much throughout all of this, and was feeling really bad because I felt like I've hurt my sweetheart, and I really loved her really deeply. And, I had literally come forward in good faith, like, hey, here's something that according to our church, our religion, our beliefs is wrong, and I want to stop doing it. And so anyways, she had a whole laundry list of things that I needed to do to kind of get back in her good graces, so to speak. And I know some of these were advice that her uncle and other family had given her, in addition to other things that she had. So it was like I needed to go to 12-step church addiction recovery meetings every week. I needed to, of course, stop looking at pornography, cold turkey, 100%. I needed to take like some marriage enhancement classes at BYU the next semester, and needed to go to therapy. And like, I was like, okay, whatever it takes to, save our marriage, because we had gone from like 0 to 100 in 2 seconds, because it had been like things were going great. And then I tell her about this one little thing, and it completely changed everything.
So for John, I want to ask you, Mr. Clinical Psychologist, expert in all things Mormonism, this has got to be pretty common amongst a lot of Mormon marriages, especially for let's say there's a couple that's in the church. What is like almost the prescription for if you want to be in a faithful like LDS marriage, or maybe you're not LDS anymore, but you're still not comfortable with your spouse looking at pornography? What is a woman or a husband, if that's the wife looking at it, like what is a couple to do? Because I can't imagine that nothing that your wife did seems like it was out of step with what she was told to do. So this is again, systems, not people. Kind of situation.
Like I'm definitely not sitting here trying to bash on her or anything like that. System, definitely, all of this reaction is very much a result of the way she was raised and the system that she and I were raised in. Yeah.
So like what would be the standard? Like if somebody's like, oh my gosh, this is against my church's rules, or this is just not what I agreed to in marriage. I would like my husband to not be looking at this, but I don't want to, maybe people are just they have this inclination to shame, to, cry, to feel hurt. I feel like that's like a normal kind of human reaction. Like, oh, you're looking at other women or whatever. Like what would be the healthiest way for people to navigate that? Because I kind of want to like have something from this part of the story. If somebody's going through this, or this is potentially maybe in their future or in their past, like what's the smartest way for a marriage to like overcome if your spouse is telling you that they've been looking at porn on their computer, typically like, I don't know, handful of times. You're definitely not an addict either. It's not like you're a sex addict. John, like where does your mind go when you hear McKay's story?
Yeah, this is the normal Mormon experience.
Yep.
And it is we talk a lot about things like misogyny and racism and the LGBT Mormon experience, but the shame cycle that the church puts Mormon youth into for masturbation and pornography, and then the way that marriages get stressed and or destroyed over equating pornography viewing with not just infidelity, but with acts as severe as murder. It can destroy lives, and it has destroyed many of marriages. And we actually, Natasha Helfer and I and Margie, as part of the Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis series, we did a 3-part series called A More Effective Approach to Masturbation and Pornography for Teens and Adults. And I don't want to give a cop-out by saying we'll include that in the show notes, but it's a 3-hour series where you talk about it. But the short answer is, the more you try and tell a spouse not to look at porn, the more they're likely going to look at it. So if your goal really is minimizing or even having a chance at eliminating it, the counterintuitive response is to not try and control it, and definitely not to shame it. But the more you shame it and try and control it, the more you raise the stakes. You kick them out of the bedroom. You make them sleep on the couch. You threaten them with divorce. What you do is you make them more stressed and sad and depressed, so they need some way to self-medicate, and you can't use booze or drugs to self-medicate.
Oh, it's like if it is already your coping mechanism, what else do you have?
You literally just end up masturbating and looking at porn more.
Yep.
Partly because it's just the way, the self-medicate. It's also a way to distract yourself. And there's just the basic psychological component that the more you try not to think about something, the more you think about it. And the more, people who do yo-yo dieting understand this. The more you're like, I can't eat X, Y, and Z, those are bad foods. There's a really normal psychological component where you overeat those foods you're trying to never eat. It's called the abstinence violation effect. But the more you try and say none of something, sometimes you do it more than ever. So the truth is the church's approach is sort of like optimized to maximize the behavior that they're trying to eliminate.
Yeah, I can see that.
And
and I've lived that, so I can.
Yeah. So
I
what did
definitely agree
it
with everything
actually
John just
do?
said.
Like all of that stuff that she was asking you to do. How was the shame? Did it cure you?
No, it did make me feel very depressed, and for a while there, I did stop pretty cold turkey. Like no porn, no masturbation whatsoever. We installed all sorts of crazy like filters and whatnot on computers and cell phone and whatnot.
Did you have the one that I've heard of that you can't even type it in because you speak Portuguese now? And that's one problem I've heard is that missionaries will come back speaking a foreign language and their wife will put on a pornography like filter on the computer, but they're like, aha, and you can still search it in a different language.
You're giving people ideas, Carah.
That's what Mormon Stories is all about.
How to circumvent your spouse's vigilance.
Honestly, I think whatever filter we had was like enough that even if you search for things in other languages, like it would still filter it or block it or what have you. So, I mean, I know of that loophole, but yeah.
See, I didn't give him the idea.
No, just 50,000 other people, that's all.
Yeah,
Sorry.
exactly. But
I actually got that idea at church. That's where I learned about it. We had an entire seminar at church back in 2009 about pornography once, and that was one thing that they mentioned there. I was like, that's a great idea if I spoke a different language.
So I mean, I was aware of that and had probably done that in the past at some point or another. But I mean, at this point, I was so desperate to save my marriage because she had literally said, if you don't, she gave me a deadline. She said, if you do not stop by February, I'm divorcing you. How prophetic those words would turn out to be.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Wow.
But in the meantime, I was working my ass off, proverbially speaking, doing all that recovery type stuff, going to therapy, which she was supposed to come to some therapy sessions with me. Never did. That January started a new semester at BYU and started that marriage class that she was supposed to come to with me every time. She came a grand total of once. And there was all these things going on, right? And I have to backtrack a little bit to also introduce another important thing that was happening at this time, which was I met, to make a long story short, a guy named Wesley, who was also in the BYU School of Music at the time. We were both commercial music majors. I had switched my major after about a year or so of percussion performance. And we met at this little shindig for commercial music majors, and he mentioned how he was looking for a drummer in his band, Suit Up Soldier. And my old band that I had started with some old high school buddies at the beginning of college was kind of dying. And I checked out Wesley's music and stuff. I was like, oh, this is really good, and ended up joining that band. And my friend Wesley, I soon found out, was and is gay, which, I took that in stride when he told me. And he's like, most people who are close to me know this. I've never come out like publicly on social media yet. And at that point he hadn't. But
and he was a BYU student.
Yes, he was a BYU student.
That's kind of
married
risky.
to a woman with a kid.
That's risky on top of risky. Wow.
Risky,
Okay. So
yep.
he was like confiding in you as a BYU student, as a married man with a child. Wow. That's
And it was funny. I remember that interaction. We were driving back from rehearsal, and he told me, and I was like, "Oh, okay." And he said, "And just to clarify, no, I'm not attracted to you or any of the guys in the band, for that matter." And he's like, "Sorry to hurt your ego there." I'm like, "Oh, it's fine." But
He's like, I hired you for the band for your talent.
Yeah, not for your looks, man. And you know what ended up happening was he and I started becoming very close friends as we started working together pretty intensely on this band. And to Wesley's credit, he never, tried to convince me of anything as far as like what the church may or may not be doing wrong in regards to the LGBT community. But what he did do was just honestly share, his experiences and feelings and the experiences and feelings of other LGBT persons. And oh man, it was heartbreaking for me to discover things like, electroshock gay conversion therapy at BYU in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and the way that the church just in general has treated LGBT persons. And it finally clicked for me when we were actually having that first conversation where he came out to me, and he just said, and I kind of said the Mormon mumbo jumbo of, oh, well, it's fine if you don't act on it, as long as, hate the sin, love the sinner, yada, yada. And he said, yeah, but I want you to imagine that you are brought up your whole life being told you have to marry a man, and you're really attracted to women, right? I'm like, oh, yeah. And he's like, now imagine you have to marry a man. Could you do that? And I'm like, no. And he's like, so now imagine what it must be like for me and other LGBT persons being told that we have to marry people that we're not attracted to, and that didn't sit well with me. That kept me up at night over the months. So that was so that was kind of happening simultaneously to all this stuff with confessing pornography usage to my wife, and all this huge buildup of major cognitive dissonance. The cracks in my proverbial shelf were just widening to chasm-like proportions. And it all kind of came to a head in February of 2020. So my wife and I at this point had been separated for several months, kind of off and on. She came back to live with me briefly during Christmas time, and then we had some arguments, and she had some issues with my family to the point where she told me I shouldn't hang out with one of my brothers ever because he was an quote-unquote bad influence on me.
So she was still like very orthodox in her beliefs on the church at that time?
Very orthodox, and yet at the same time, she and her family did all sorts of things that were not, kind of in line with the orthodox beliefs. I mean, including the fact that she and I had sex before we were married and whatnot. And yet here she was kind of shaming me for having looked at pornography a few times and very actively trying to stop and meet all of her demands. Things started coming to a head early that January, actually, when we had gotten back together, we're living together again. She came home after going to dinner with what I had thought was just her dad. Turned out it was both her parents, actually, which was weird because her parents were already divorced at this point. So for them to be in a room together was odd. Basically, they brought her to dinner and told her how she looked like she was going through hell, and how awful I was, and how I was never going to change, and how they were basically telling her she needed to leave me in kind of no uncertain terms, and that I was a piece of shit. And she came home feeling obviously very, stressed and sad by that, and very uncharacteristically for her, spent about 20 to 30 minutes just screaming at me, absolutely unloading, saying some pretty terrible, very cutting things, including like, I know you're going to quote unquote relapse right after this. You're a monster, and you don't think I'm enough. All untrue things. She also said I needed to find a different career other than music, other than the entertainment industry, because if I ever went on tour, I would cheat on her, in her mind. And in her parents' mind, they had told her to say that as well. And they themselves said that to me point blank, you need to find a different career, a couple times.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it was tough. And actually that was, I went and talked with the therapist I had at the time, who was a member of the church. And he said, well, maybe that is what the Lord wants you to give up. And that was the first time in my life that I actually experienced very real suicidal ideation. Was being told that by my wife, her parents, and even my therapist saying, well, maybe that's what the Lord wants you to give up. And the thought of living my life and not being able to do what I love made me feel like I wanted to kill myself.
Yeah, there's a reason why it's called like a starving artist, a starving like musician. It's like you don't do it necessarily for the money. The money could be good, but it's like you do it for the love of like music, the power of rock, right? Like
the power of rock
and like
roll,
if you don't have a partner that's in that with you, like where are you going to go in your marriage?
If they're not supportive, exactly. And I feel like, again, systems not people. A lot of that does come from the way the Mormon Church stresses so much the idea of the nuclear family, man with a 9 to 5. And, is able to be home and take his kids to church every Sunday and go to the temple together and whatnot, because I had received a lot of messages like that from relatives, all growing up, and mostly aunts and uncles. My parents would, tell me to, thoroughly research things, and be sure of my decisions regarding my career. But at the end of the day, they were always very supportive of me wanting to be a professional musician, too much to their credit. That kind of goes against the grain of what I feel like a lot of people in Mormonism and in our own extended family said to me all the time. So
were you able to, I guess, kick the pornography habit to your wife's satisfaction?
I wasn't looking at all at the time. Wasn't masturbating, nothing. But then after that kind of outburst that night, a few days went by, and she apologized for yelling at me and stuff, not necessarily for the things she said. But then a few days later, we had like a very minor argument, and after that, she was like, "I think I'm going to go live with my mom again. I need time to heal," and yada yada. And to me, that seemed counterintuitive. I was like, "Aren't we trying to heal our marriage together?" But she left again. And a month later, it was the day before my birthday, so February 22nd, 2020. We had just had a great, weekend together the weekend before for Valentine's Day, gone on a few really fun dates. It felt like we weren't fighting at all, and it felt like things were kind of getting back to normal. February 22nd, I wake up and I have just this weird feeling of dread, kind of a pit in my stomach. And I remember just glancing at her Facebook page, and every picture of us was gone. Her name was changed back to her maiden name. And at this point, I started having what I can only describe as a panic attack, which I'd never had before in my life. And I tried calling her, no answer, tried several more times, no answer. I was like, okay, I'm going to eat breakfast, then I'll call her again. So I did that. Multiple calls, no answer. I finally decided, okay, I'm going to drive the 30 minutes up to her mom's house where she's staying to figure out what in the hell is going on. And literally, as I'm hopping into the car, she calls me back. And I'm like, and she's like, hey. And I'm like, hey, honey, what's happening? Why is your name changed to your maiden name on Facebook, and where are all the pictures of us? And she said, McKay, I'm divorcing you. I already talked to a lawyer. I told him everything. And, that turned into a somewhat heated, somewhat like weepy, sobbing discussion of like, I don't understand. I'm literally doing everything for you right now. I'm literally considering letting go of my career that I've worked for since I was 12 years old. Like, I haven't looked at porn in months. I haven't masturbated, yada, yada, yada. And she just wouldn't have any of it. And she
So
was
did she say why?
So later she did. So to make a long story short in that regard, so the next day on my birthday, she came and got all her things. And it was so weird. She was so cold, like would barely talk to me. It was a goddamn nightmare, that I had never wanted to live. And I think a couple months later we were texting probably just about some of the divorce proceedings that needed to happen or whatever. And, or maybe we were talking on the phone. It's a little cloudy, maybe a little blocked out because of trauma. And, you know, I asked her, like, you know, why? Because I had stopped, you know, I was like complying with all her demands basically.
Yeah.
And she said, you know, we've changed so much, and you're not the same guy that I fell in love with, and I'm not the same girl either. And at the end of the day, I think it came down to those things, and she couldn't support my career, and she couldn't get it out of her head that I was some sort of monster or something for having normal human sexual urges as a early 20-something-year-old man. And also, I think it does all kind of stem from the fact that we didn't date long enough. We got married too young. And I'm not saying that if we had dated longer that we necessarily would never have gotten married. Maybe we still would have, because I know I did love her, and I know she did love me. But at the end of the day, you know, at the same time, maybe we wouldn't have. You know, maybe we would have dated longer and realized, you know, we've got a lot of chemistry and attraction here, and there's some things we have in common, but maybe we're just not the best match. And that would have been far better than what actually happened. But unfortunately, there's this whole Mormon purity culture, chastity teachings, and such a heavy emphasis on marriage, eternal marriage. And 2 years post-mission, I already felt like the proverbial old maid menace to society, like, I need to get married now, you know? And that messaging was all just reinforced through church messages and leaders and relatives. So it's definitely complicated. Like her reasons, I think a lot of it definitely stems from those initial things, for sure.
That's really sad.
Because I've also seen this happen to a lot of friends as well. And it's sad every time.
Yeah, like, church, please stop putting people in this pressure cooker. Like, please call it this culture. Like, I want healthy marriages. Everybody, church, outside the church, like, we want healthy marriages. And some of these things are just like not conducive to like all of this trauma and breakups and kids and so many problems that get thrown into that mix. And then what did the divorce do to your faith then at that point?
Yeah, my shelf broke at that point. It was already hanging by a thread. I was already at a point where I kind of felt pretty atheist. I wouldn't admit that, but on the inside, I was like, God just doesn't make sense to me anymore, and I don't think there is one. But I was trying so hard to save my marriage that I was continuing to go through the motions and trying, like, reading my scriptures, doing everything that a good Mormon guy does to try and build faith and whatnot. But it was pretty much gone at that point. And especially after all the stuff I'd been through at BYU and all the Pharisaical culture there, and learning about all those things with the LGBT community and becoming really good friends with Wesley, and seeing all the pain that the church put him and his family through. It was the last straw. The only thing keeping me in the church at that point was my marriage. And with that gone, I was like, I'm done. I'm out. And I, never looked back, never went to church again. Within a couple months, I think I decided, I think I want to remove my records. I don't want to be any part of this organization that has been so racist in the past, is currently still very sexist, very homophobic in so many ways, and that just brought me so much pain, literally because of the things that it taught and that it told me to do with my life. So
it sounds like sorry, you're going to finish.
No,
so
please.
I was just going to ask, so it sounds like a lot of the things like the common truth claims, the CES letter, the things that are more common, especially with people on Mormon Stories, that actually break their shelves. It sounds like you're literally saying that just like empathy for other people told you that this isn't adding up.
Who'd have thunk it? Empathy for other people and for myself is basically what broke my shelf. Like, so it wasn't the kind of the story that I've heard a lot, both on this podcast and just in general, was someone read the CES letter and like that broke their shelf, right? And that is totally valid.
For sure,
nothing wrong with that. But my path out was definitely different. I had read, prior to deciding I was done with the church, like one teeny little snippet of the CES letter, because it never sat well with me. Several of the Joseph Smith things, like coerced polygamy, and also the fact that he married 14-year-old girls. So I remember probably in the last couple months of my membership in the church reading that and being kind of shaken, but then immediately running to Fair Mormon to try and like assuage my conscience that, oh no, it's fine. Everything's fine over here in the church. Like, it's still true. But no, it was not fine internally. Just my inside, spiritually speaking, were just roiling with kind of really complex feelings and emotions. And eventually I did start getting more into the, I guess, quote unquote, ex-Mormon type of stuff, like reading the CES letter and TikTok. But it took me several months. So post-divorce and leaving the church, it was just kind of 2020 was a bad year for everyone, right? And for me, it was kind of compounded by the divorce and a faith crisis. And I could not sleep because A, I was depressed from my wife leaving me, and B, I was depressed from there's no God, which is this kind of basic assurance that I had grown up my whole life having. And for that to be taken away, and honestly taken away, I didn't just decide out of the blue one day, I'm not going to believe in God anymore. To those who might be listening to or watching this thinking that, that was a very painful process arriving at that conclusion. And that is not the conclusion that I wanted in any sense. And eventually in fall of 2020, I had downloaded TikTok just for fun, right? I was just going to see what it was about, maybe make some fun videos.
That's how it starts.
And that damn algorithm, and we talk about Google and Siri listening in on our conversations, can confirm they do, because by this point, Wesley and I were roommates, and I don't want to tell too much of his story, but he also went through divorce. You guys, plug for him. You guys should totally have him on here. We would talk about ex-Mormon stuff a lot of the time. I'm sure our phones were listening. And one of the first videos that pops up on my TikTok feed after downloading the app last fall of 2020 was Exmo-Lex. And I watched it for a second. And as soon as I realized what she was talking about, I was like, oh, this is bringing up all my trauma. Scroll.
Wow. That's that's not even exaggeration. I'm sure that honestly happened and happens to people. They're I'm not ready to address this issue yet. But the algorithm just feeds you things on TikTok.
Yep. And it kept feeding me those things. So eventually I started watching her videos. Ex-Mormon Mindy started popping up. And honestly, a huge shout out and thank you to the two of them for sure. Being a way that I've helped, that has helped me process a lot of my trauma.
Shout out Exmo-Lex, Ex-Mormon Mindy.
And Nuance Ho.
Shout out Nuance Ho, wherever you are. Bless you.
Yeah, so those three actually, you three, I guess I should say, I started seeing those videos more and more on my For You page, and eventually I was like, oh, what the hell, I'll follow them. And then that just kind of opened the floodgates, and it helped me really start processing all these feelings that for months I had not wanted to deal with. I'd just been I'm just going to leave the church, but I'll be that ex-Mormon who actually does leave the church alone. Well,
we've all been there.
There's a reason why so many of us don't, right? And if there are some of us who do, good for them.
Good for them,
know what?
For sure.
This organization
I validate that as well.
Caused me and caused a lot of us a lot of pain, and it needs to be spoken about, and hopefully, at the very least, to bring about positive change for the people who choose to remain, and just for everyone in general, especially those of us who live in Utah, where the legislature is practically controlled by the church.
Right,
that'd be nice.
It's got its hands in a lot of spaces.
Yeah, for sure.
And then what gave you, so you said you downloaded TikTok, you started to feel inspired maybe by content creators that you saw on there. And then for every TikToker, John asked me this question when I was on as well. And it almost was a no-brainer to me to go from just throwing my hat into the ring, you could say, of yeah, I want to make ex-Mormon content. I know people are going to be upset, but I felt like the house was already kind of burned down. Why not play in the ashes? I already told my family I was leaving the church. So what gave you, what inspired you? What gave you the confidence to start making your own content then on TikTok?
Well, so there were a couple things. First of all, like I said, when I first started seeing those Exmo videos, it started bringing back up all this trauma, and then just add to that the fact that last November, December of 2020 is kind of when my depression from the divorce and everything was about at its height, to the point where I was inches away from cutting myself.
Oh, wow.
And literally I had a knife in my hand one night in December last year, and right as I was about to do the deed, like the door opened and Wesley and it came home and was like, "Hey, I got pizza," like not knowing what he had just saved me from.
Wow.
So yeah, a little bit of a sometimes some viewers like a bit of a content warning or a trigger warning that this is some of the more emotional stuff to be talking about. We did a really good episode on self-harm.
Yeah. With a TikTok friend of mine, Kelsey Marie Warner. Yeah.
And we're really grateful for that. What was it, self-harm or was it kind of suicidal ideation for you?
I had suicidal ideation for sure, for a large part of 2020, but where I was, I guess, quote unquote, thinking of starting, which is a terrible thing to think about now, was like just cutting myself, my wrists particularly.
As self-harm?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for listeners who don't have any idea why would that occur to you, can you explain what it is about intense psychological pain that would lead to that I don't want to say choice, but
those actions, sure.
Those thoughts. Yeah.
It's complicated, and I think in large part it came from the fact that I felt so deep down in this dark depression, and I just felt to the point where I just felt numb, and like I wanted to feel something, and even to the point where the thought of maybe making myself feel some intense physical pain might be better than kind of the depression that I was in. And thankfully I was kind of saved from that inadvertently by my very good friend Wesley, and then my family was aware that I was at very least depressed. And did some really kind things for me that last Christmas that helped me out a lot. And eventually by January I was like, I need to start going to therapy, because for almost a solid year post divorce and post leaving the church, I was like, I don't want to go to therapy. I don't want to talk about this shit with anyone. I just want to throw it in a deep dark hole and lock the key and just never deal with it, right? But that is, I think, a large part of precisely what led to me feeling so depressed to the point where I was having suicidal ideation and very close to self-harm, right? So I guess plug for therapy, anyone listening to this or watching this.
For sure.
If you're in that kind of headspace, it is so much better to talk about it with a qualified professional than to just let it fester. You don't want to go to that dark place, trust me.
Throwing it in a dark hole, not productive, counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Shaming spouses for pornography use, counterintuitive.
Yep, all those things. All those things.
Yeah, that's super hard stuff to deal with. I'm so sorry that you had to go through that.
Thank you. But so then during the first few months of 2021, I was still watching a lot of ex-Mormon content, but the thought hadn't really occurred to me to create my own channel on TikTok, my own page, right? Well, I stumbled upon Mormon Stories podcast this past spring. I'd heard of it before, but all I had heard of it was, oh, that's an anti-Mormon podcast. Don't listen to that, when I was a member of the church. And then it hadn't occurred to me that it would be helpful for me to start listening to the podcast.
It hadn't occurred to you that John isn't Mormon Voldemort.
John D.
He's not. He's
I can't get over that.
Sweetheart, yeah.
No, John is a really nice guy, everybody.
It's true,
okay?
yeah. So you got over what your preoccupation with what Mormon Stories might be.
Yeah, and I just started listening to some episodes, and I was like, whoa, this is like helpful for me. And at the same time, I was going through therapy. So at this point, I was definitely on the up and up, mentally and emotionally speaking. And then, I listened to your interview, Carah, and it was just awesome. And then I ended up listening this past May at some point to Exmo Lex's interview here on Mormon Stories. And, she was already a creator that I'd been, again, following for several months and really enjoying her ex-Mormon content on TikTok. And listening to her story was one of two kind of big main things that catalyzed me to start my own TikTok page. So while I was listening to her story, she, in her story, does talk about her experience with sexual assault. And for me, as a fellow sexual abuse survivor, that I was sitting in the car listening to it, I think delivering DoorDash, and I started crying.
Really?
Yeah, and then also hearing her talk about a family member, I believe her dad, tell her something about like, you can leave the church, but shut up about it, stop talking about it or whatever. Because I then, just a couple weeks later, had an experience with an uncle who, to make a long story short, basically shamed me for leaving the church, said some really nasty things. We were down visiting him and his family for his son, my cousin's mission homecoming. And I had decided, I'm not going to go to the church service, but everything else, all the other family activities that are planned for that weekend, the homecoming, like lunch and dinner afterwards, I'll be there for everything to support him, but I'm not going to go into a church building. I don't want to do it. It'll be triggering for me. I'll be sitting there just uncomfortable the whole time, probably like visibly agitated, and nobody wants that, right?
Sounds like healthy boundaries that your family was totally amped to respect.
Well,
or
my parents,
your parents,
yeah.
no?
I mean, they asked me to come, and I was like, no, I'm not going, and they respected that. But my uncle, he comes
didn't
and
understand
takes me aside. Yeah, he comes and takes me aside. Later that day, while everyone's like having the lunch and stuff, and we're alone in this one room where I'd just gone off to quietly eat. And he's like, hey, I noticed you didn't come to your cousin's homecoming talk. Why is that? And it's like, as if you don't know. But, I initially just wanted to diffuse the situation. So I'm just like, oh, well, I'm kind of experiencing some allergies. I wasn't feeling good, which actually was true. But that wasn't, of course, the only reason why I didn't go. And then he just cuts me off and he's like, I know you've fallen away. I'm so sorry for the way that woman betrayed you, but you're throwing away the light and goodness that can bring you happiness. And like, I had not seen this uncle, I'm pretty sure, since my wedding, certainly not since getting divorced. I would have loved it if he had come and talked to me and just said, I'm so sorry for all that you've been through with your divorce. And, I know you've left the church, and if you want to talk about that, I'm here for you. But if not, it's cool. But no, he had to preach to me, basically. And at one point, he even literally said, and I quote, I wonder if you didn't come to to church today because you couldn't stand the light. How that A is just so untrue, B made my blood boil, and C was so uncalled for. Like so out of pocket, out of line, out of left field. Like Uncle, you're, I hate to use this term. I know we're trying to be believer friendly here, but in the moment, my thought was your cult has absolutely zero light to offer me. And in fact, has been the source of most of the dark times in my life. So don't tell me that I can't stand the light of your little boys club, your little church or whatever, which is statistically insignificant compared to the rest of the world. And there's a lot of light in a lot of other religions and a lot of other people, let me tell you.
So what did you end up saying?
I didn't say any of that at the time. I said, I did say, wow, that's really hurtful and untrue and not okay of you to say. And then he kind of, sidestepped and like, he was very attacking with the way he was talking to me. Like, well, what do you believe? And what if I'm right and you're wrong? Then what happens after we die, huh? And I'm like, well, I'm sure you believe I'm going to hell. I don't believe that place exists, but whatever, I guess we won't know until we die. And then he had the audacity at the end of this conversation to say like, your blood, I love you. I'd do anything for you. And I'm like, okay, thanks, love you too. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh, you love me? You'd do anything for me? Your blood? How about you love me enough to respect my boundaries and love me for who I am and not for who or what you think I should be? And that is a huge problem that I've seen a lot since leaving the church with a lot of members of the church who, and I get it, like it's so ingrained, it's so near and dear to them that any like call out of something the church does wrong, or even just us leaving the church, feels like an attack to them. They feel like they have to defend it. But I'm here to tell any believing Mormon listening to this, you don't have to. All you have to do is literally what Jesus himself said and just love people as they are and leave it at that.
Right on. Right on. Mic drop, by the way, McKay.
Oh, thanks. So that was the final straw for me to be like, I'm starting a TikTok. My mind didn't immediately go there, but I needed someone to vent to. I actually messaged you, Carah, on Instagram. And
that's how I first met McKay virtually, was him telling me that story.
Yeah. And then I decided the first thing I was going to do was I came out publicly on my Facebook that I had left the church. And it was kind of a bit of a manifesto where I listed some of my reasons, really in a kind of respectful way, I would say. Actually, and if anyone wants to read that, it's on my Facebook. You can just look up McKay Johnson. That post is public. My profile is public. You're welcome to go and read
actually really
that
good advice
post.
too, because so many people are, should I come out publicly on Facebook? Should I tell people? Should I not?
Yeah, and I feel like, that decision is completely up to the individual. For over a year, I had thought I wasn't going to do that, but then these things kind of, I don't want to say forced my hand, but they definitely made me think, oh, maybe it would be a good thing for me to very clearly and very loudly tell the world, this is who I am, this is where I stand, respect my boundaries and I'll respect yours. And, to those who are inclined to not do so, back the hell off, basically. So anyways, afterwards, I blocked that particular uncle, and, I guess throwing this out there, if he ever wants to have contact again and repair that bridge, that relationship, he needs to apologize sincerely to me without any justifications for the way he kind of verbally attacked me and shamed me just for leaving the church. And that I have that boundary now with any family. If they do anything similar, I have no need for that. They will be cut out of my life. That sucks to feel like I had to do that.
For sure. It sucks.
But I had to do that,
Yeah. To maintain a healthy, just mental state post-church, you kind of have to be your own advocate. And I think you're doing that really, really well. That's a really good way to put all of that too. Wish you could, that old, I wish I could go back and I wish I could do things differently when you're going through your faith crisis and your journey and you don't always do things perfectly. But then also Mormons are also still figuring out, how do I talk to my non-believing friends and family? And we're all still trying to have empathy for each other in different places, It's super difficult to navigate these waters.
It is. It's they're murky waters, to say the least. Stormy waters maybe is a better way of putting it. But and then after that, I posted on Facebook, and then that post kind of blew up, and then I joined some ex-Mormon Facebook groups because I was finally like, I need to make friends who've gone through these same things and that we can bond and stuff. And I made a little glow up post in a couple of those groups, and those blew up.
What do you mean by glow up posts? Before and after?
I posted a picture of what I used to look like and what I look like now. So the short hair kind of RM look versus the long hair, beard, white man Jesus look. And those posts blew up, and I just had introduced myself, and I wasn't intending for it to be a thirst trap or anything, but there were some thirsty comments from men and women in those comment sections. And I started thinking maybe, I can have a positive impact on people by creating content. And I'd kind of already been thinking of that from the experiences of listening to Exmo Lex's Mormon Stories interview and the whole thing that happened with my uncle. So started a new TikTok, decided I would call it Spartacus Unchained. Spartacus because, that's been my kind of drummer stage name, nickname since I was 13 years old. And Unchained because...
Good choice, by the way.
Thank you. Unchained because it feels like, I've broken these chains of Mormonism and organized religion in general that were not doing much good for me in my life for 24 years. And I... started making a lot of videos, and the fifth video I posted was about my mission sexual abuse and how that was one thing that led to me leaving the church. And that video went viral.
Really?
I posted.
What was the reception?
Well, I posted it super late at night, woke up the next morning, and I had that little 99 plus notifications thing on TikTok, which I know you're very familiar with, Carah. And I was like, holy shit, and it already had over 100,000 views at that time. And within a couple of days, it past 500,000, and then it kind of slowed down. Now it's at like 600,000 or something. Still my most viewed video to this day.
And what do you discuss exactly in that video? Was it only a minute long too?
Yeah, it's just a 1 minute TikTok. It's that popular audio where it's like, it's everything you ever want, from Greatest Showman, right? Except then it slows down at the end. And by the end, it's like just the voice, and it's like really quiet and kind of sad, depressing sounding. And it talks about how I went from, like getting ready for the mission, received my mission call, like meeting my trainer. He starts sexually harassing me. I don't have anyone to talk to, and I don't speak the language yet. He fully sexually assaults me. I'm shamed for being assaulted. And, it just kind of goes downhill from there, right? Like by the end, it's like finding out Joseph Smith was a sexual predator who used religion to get women to have sex with him. And then the last one is like realizing I spent 2 years preaching a lie, enduring sexual abuse and poor conditions to preach a lie to people. And from there, I was like, well, full send. I guess I'm going to do these TikToks like more. And I've had some other videos that have gotten pretty good, kind of similar traction. And it's been a thing for me that has opened so many doors. And, aside from like just being here, like meeting you guys. I mean, Carah, I met you before I ever had any inkling of, maybe I'll be on Mormon Stories podcast and share my story with people or whatever. It led to me making some amazing friends who I think will be lifelong friends over this summer. And it's been very cathartic for me and very healing. And that's another thing that I want believing Mormon listeners to understand that me and other TikTok content creators in the ex-Mormon realm of TikTok, putting these things out that sometimes might be offensive to you. I've put out some videos of me doing silly dances in temple clothes and kind of making fun of that. But I just plead that active Mormons understand where we're coming from. The temple for me represents all sorts of trauma and all sorts of abusive practices, represents lies and lack of informed consent. Like none of us know what the temple is going to be about when we go through. None of us know beforehand that some of the, I'm trying to be respectful here, some of the hand signs in there, or at least that used to be in there that still kind of are there, are like literally representing a dagger to spill your own blood should you disclose any of the temple secrets, that kind of thing. Like, so realize that us making fun of maybe some of those things helps us take our power back.
Right.
And helps us process the trauma that we have felt as a result of Mormonism.
Because so often it's just interpreted as mocking what's sacred to other people. Yeah. And that's how people, but I don't think that's what's totally going on. I think it's about trying to heal.
It is.
And people can't understand that. Why would you have to mock? They always say they can leave the church, but they can't leave it alone. Or they say, they're so angry or they're so bitter. What would you, if you had to kind of look in the camera and talk to faithful believers that see that stuff and just say, well, that's mocking and sacrilege. What's your heartfelt attempt to explain how that's actually healing for you? You said taking your power back, but maybe anything else you'd want to say about that?
Well, I mean, imagine that there's something or someone in your life that holds power over you, very real power, like having to do with your eternal salvation. And that creates a lot of fear in you. And if you do anything wrong, that you're damned to hell or something. That's totally what the temple is. If you reveal the signs and tokens, there's literally a line in the temple where Satan says, if you don't walk up to all the covenants made in these temples in this day, you'll be in his power, So imagine that, if you will, something that has a lot of power and instills a lot of fear and control over you. And then you come to the conclusion that stuff is not true, but it still kind of holds a lot of power and fear over you. I have friends who have been out of the church for years, and they still get kind of uneasy talking about stuff inside the temple and stuff, even though they don't believe it, because they're like, well, but what if? And so for me, being able to laugh at those things, being able to laugh at my sexual abuser, being able to laugh at, yes, some aspects of Mormonism, helps me to not feel fear of those things anymore, which in my mind is an irrational, unnecessary fear. It helps me to feel happy and get over that and heal from the trauma that those things have caused for me. And I know it does that for others too. I get DMs on Instagram and TikTok all the time from people saying, thank you for your video where you danced in temple clothes, like, which may seem weird and silly, but because it literally, they might even have a higher level of fear of the temple ceremony than I do, and it helps them to process and deal with that. So it's not about just, oh, let's make fun of the Mormons or whatever, good old persecution complex. Like, literally, I've said this from day one, my ex-Mormon content is for ex-Mormons. It's not for Mormons. Occasionally I'll put out a video that's actually directed to active believing members of the church, like trying to be thought-provoking or start a constructive discussion about something and hoping that they might try and advocate for positive change within the religion. But at the end of the day, a lot of my content is more about helping other people who have been through the church and come out the other side, scarred and bruised and bloodied and battered and beaten down, to be able to heal from that. And just creating the content has been helpful for me, and I feel like I'm just paying forward the help and healing that I received from watching Ex-Molex and Ex-Mormon Mindy and Nuance Hose content and other great. I just want to shout out all these amazing creators. We don't have time to shout everyone out, but there's a lot, and we're here trying to build our own community and pick up the shattered pieces of our lives and still have some sense of meaning and a new sense of community when the old one was kind of ripped away from us.
That's super, super well said. And as somebody who I also make humorous content, technically for ex-Mormons, but Mormons are welcome to watch it as well. But like I always say, if somebody tells me to stop making the content that I make, I'm just like, this validates people leaving the church who are going through hard things, and it makes them laugh. Like, should I not? Like, should McKay not make that anymore? And I think that usually kind of creates a type of light bulb in people when they actually have to come to terms with, like, I'm telling you what my content's for. If it's not for you, should I just not make it all of a sudden? And they're like, okay, I can understand. It's technically not for me. Like, you can scroll on. You don't need to go out of your way to comment. I totally get that it's something sacred to you, but I think you put it perfectly. And if anyone wants to go back and listen to Ex-Molex's Mormon Stories interview, she talked about why she wears her temple clothes. And I don't wear temple clothes in my videos, but I have no shade against it because it's a certain type of, like, temple trauma that you're like, these are my clothes. Like, Ex-Molex, she did a great job of explaining that as well. Like, these were.
Well, if you ever want to do a temple clothes dance collab, though, Carah.
I love, you have really, the what's the dance one again?
Coincidence. I believe me and my friend Courtney did that one. I will shout her out. Just Court X. Everyone go follow her. Anyways.
Yeah. And I for like you were just explaining, like, we can totally accept that, like, when you're in the church, these things are sacred, but you're taking back your power in a different way. And secondly, I just wanted to also shout out how cool it is that what we get to do here in this room, like in Mormon Stories, is that it doesn't always feel like it, but like when we were recording and I was over there with Ex-Molex, and just that had such a good wave and an influence that now we have somebody who listened to that podcast episode that was inspired by it is now, like, here sitting in the chair being interviewed, and like hopefully that will spur other people and inspire other people, and that your story and the things that you've been through and the way that you've grown from it, like, that is going to have other really cool ripple effects. And I hope that people can, like, garner a lot of taking back their own power and their own confidence, in whatever aspect that they need. Like, so thank you, McKay, for sharing all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's my hope too. I mean, again, I have to emphasize, I'm not out here trying to bash people per se, or even like bash the church. Really, I think my end goal is I want the Mormon church to be able to change things that it does or teaches that are harmful to people, specifically things that it's done or teaches that, have been harmful to me in my life, and that I've seen it be harmful to others in their lives, right? And at the end of the day, I'll be 100% honest, even if it does change those things, I'm never going to rejoin the church. Now, that has more to do with just the fact that now I'm pretty atheist, don't really believe in God anymore. But would I love to see, a church and organized religions in general that are much kinder to people and promote, like, healthy attitudes about sex and abuse and mental health and the LGBT community, all of that stuff? Yes, I would love to see that.
Advocate for the victims.
Yeah. instead of, sending a hotline to Curtin McConkie legal team to sweep it under the rug. Man, that still makes my blood boil thinking of that. But things like that, those are legitimately quantifiably harmful things that can change, and I think can change without necessarily altering some core beliefs, in like God and Jesus and like the atonement and whatnot, or hell, even eternal families, we can still hold our like near and dear beliefs while changing the harmful things that have come about because of them.
Right on. And so since you've kind of like thrown your hat into talking about your experiences, your traumas, making your own TikTok and things, sounds like you do have some, like a real heart for speaking about these messages, making TikToks, being an advocate. So what are your future plans in this kind of like ex-Mormon space moving forward?
Well, I'm going to keep making content on TikTok for one. I mean, this whole soaking thing that has been going on this Soaktober has just opened up a whole new world.
You've been making content about that?
A whole new world. Yes, actually, I just released a couple
for our listeners,
videos.
What is Soaktober? For our viewers and listeners who don't know.
Soaktober is a month, usually in October, dedicated to the fascinating subject of soaking in Mormondom, which
I love how I asked you about advocacy and you're like, we're going to talk about soaking instead.
well,
we're going to get to the really important stuff. No,
it's
true.
I'm going
to. It's because it's also fun. Don't forget, we are also here for the lulls.
Yeah,
we're here
and there
to
are totally
entertain.
things that stem from Mormon culture, like soaking or derfing, that are just funny and fun and harmless for anyone on any side of the faith spectrum that I think we can totally just laugh at and kind of make fun of, and like it's fine. And soaking is one of those things, but I am also going to continue to make serious videos advocating for sexual abuse survivors and advocating for changes in purity culture and all that jazz.
Yeah, you make a good variety of videos. It's also just kind of like what I want to get across to the audience.
I try to, yeah. I try to strike a balance between the really serious, heavy ones and then the lighthearted, funny ones and the temple clothes dance one. There'll be more of those, more Jesus cosplays for sure. That's kind of my plans as far as Exmo TikTok goes. I'll be at Thrive attending, just having a ball this November. So
Oh, good. People can come get a hug from Spartacus.
yeah, come get a hug if you would like a hug.
Oh, good. Yeah, this is just like an impromptu commercial for Thrive on accident. We didn't even mean to bring it up. Thrive is coming to the Salt Palace November 14th. I will be doing a big TikTok panel with a bunch of people. We got Exmo Lex, Ex-Mormon Mindy, Kylene, Jack Mormon, Jordan and McKay, Devil Trout, me, doing a big fun thing at Thrive. Get your tickets, register now at thrivebeyondreligion.com. Sorry to interrupt, but I felt like I just had to. John, we're towards the end wrapping up, but there's one more thing that I wanted to ask McKay about, obviously, which is, so you went through what sounds like a pretty traumatic, horrible divorce, and a major reason was because that you were just not going to be able to see eye to eye about your career and being a musician for a living. Tell me about how your career is going and your passion for music.
Well, right after the divorce, I mean, things took a downward turn for the entertainment industry with the pandemic, which shall not be named. But we as a band, my band is called Suit Up Soldier, everyone. We stuck it out and we managed to... we had a tour planned, which got canceled for 2020. So instead, we ran a Kickstarter campaign, raised enough money to make our debut album, which is out now on all streaming and download services. So Spotify, Apple Music, you name it. The name of our debut album is Curse the Day I Act My Age, which is a line from our current most popular song, Tongue Tied Twisted, which just recently passed 1 million streams on Spotify.
No way.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's one small step, and hopefully there will be more of those. But my plans with that are to continue playing drums, continue writing songs, continue singing, and particularly with this band and probably some solo stuff down the road as well. We just are at close to the end of our first kind of mini regional tour. We were in Rexburg, Idaho this past weekend, which was our funnest tour date to date.
Home of BYU, Idaho.
Yes,
Woo.
those kids are so repressed, they just go crazy for any concert happening. It was great. It was a good time. We went to Los Angeles before that, and we had a show in Provo before that. And we're wrapping it up in Phoenix, Arizona next week. So I don't know if this is going to air before then, but if it does, October 21st, Phoenix, Arizona, the Rebel Lounge. Come see me shredding the drums live with Suit Up Soldier, and look and follow us on, Instagram, Facebook at Suit Up Soldier.
So if people want to come out to a show eventually in the future, they can be able to find the next place that you're playing on the Instagram?
Yeah, on the Instagram, at suitupsoldier _ on there. And just follow us and for good music, good times. And we always announce our shows, beforehand, so you can come see and go listen to us if you don't believe that we're any good. I'd like to think we're a little bit above your average local quote unquote band, and we're really pursuing it full time at this point.
I've checked out the music and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was pro.
Thank you,
It
John.
was professional and fun and interesting and sophisticated, and it gets a John DeLynn double thumbs up. We'll see, Carah.
Hell yeah.
How many thumbs up?
I was watching his YouTube channel, and he had a video on there, like that whole glow up thing that
Yeah.
before he
Yeah.
looked like this, and just like did they really call it shredding of the drums? That's the first time I heard that.
Shredding the drums, beating the drums, banging the drums.
Banging the drums.
I tried to avoid that last one.
So much, double
So much
context there.
sexual tension with that phrase. But that's how you can check out my band and I guess support me in that way. You can also follow my TikTok at Spartacus _ Unchained if you would like some dank ex-Mormon content.
Yeah. Everybody, check out Spartacus _ Unchained. Check out Suit Up Soldier. By the end of an interview, I literally can't talk sometimes because I'm like, dup. So sorry. Please do
All
not
good.
tell me in the comment
All good.
section. I swear I can talk. It's just sometimes, the hours go by. So any other quick plugs? Do we have anything else? Just this is a really talented person in front of me, and I'm like, please follow him, everybody.
Yeah, I appreciate the follows, and I pledge to continue making fun and helpful content, both, with my TikTok and with the band. We've got a ton of new songs written that we're just now starting to get into kind of recording and producing those songs, and they'll be released. I can't give any dates, but hopefully soon. So just follow the band for updates on that. I think those are my
Exciting.
plugs. My Venmo is at Master Spartacus if anyone's interested.
Yeah, we always like on Mormon Stories to say people get paid, like you make great content, and when people DM you especially, and you're like, oh, I didn't know like the content I was making was actually like helping people
Yeah,
and stuff.
yeah.
So everybody, please go follow McKay. Spartacus _ Unchained. Go follow his band. Check out his music. He's extremely talented. Drumming looks easy. It is not. I've tried it. I gave up very quickly.
Thanks for that.
I'm relearning the saxophone right now, which is actually kind of easy.
We should
but-
jam.
I know. What else do we need for our like Mormon Stories band? If I'm playing the saxophone, you're on the drums.
A bassist. We could do just that. A trio.
Can we do like a stand-up like bass? Someone's
Sure.
just going like da-dum, da-dum, da-dum,
Yep.
and you're like "Tsk-tsk-tsk-tsk," and I'm like blah.
Just like that, Carah.
Okay. Somebody transpose that song I just wrote. We'll play it real soon. McKay, you're such a fabulous human. And thank you
you.
for being like so incredibly vulnerable from start to finish about your story. And thank you obviously for driving up. This is a 2-part episode, by the way. So we made you come in and tell your story in 2 separate parts. So that's
happy to do it.
it's like it's kind of like emotionally draining, and I know that it's difficult to get in the right headspace to be able to explain all of these things. So really, thank you so much for explaining all these things, and I hope viewers at home that you took something important and lovely from such a wonderful human coming in and telling everything that he's been through, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And
Yeah.
John, do you have any other final thoughts that you want to wrap up with?
You talked about really important and for Mormon Stories, groundbreaking topics.
I think so.
I think the
Male sexual abuse and whatnot.
male sexual abuse and how the church, I talk a lot about, church might call me Mormon Voldemort or talk about how Mormon Stories is evil. The mission of the Open Stories Foundation from the very beginning has been to help prevent unnecessary divorces, to help prevent depression and anxiety, death by suicide, And this stuff is real. And we talk a lot about racism, sexism, homophobia. We don't talk a lot about the way the church destroys lives and families through sexual shame. We don't talk about that enough. And especially, we don't talk about it enough from the male point of view. So your willingness to be vulnerable about being a victim of sexual abuse and how the church's unhealthy messages around porn and sexuality wrecked your marriage when it seems as though two people cared about each other and could have built a life together. It's just, I'm so sorry for what you've been through. The church will never apologize to you, but Carah and I, for whatever it's worth, will say we're so sorry that happened to you.
Well, thank you guys.
It shouldn't have happened on your mission, and it shouldn't have happened in your marriage. And we're sorry, but congratulations, because part of the healing is to find a way to make meaning and purpose out of what you experienced. And what you're doing is telling your story, and it's going to help other people not feel so alone, not feel so shamed, not feel like they're broken and bad. And maybe it'll help prevent other similar situations in the future, either in people's private lives, or maybe the church will eventually get the message and start to make the meaningful change it needs to make. And the only way it happens is through people speaking up, and you did that. So I just want to thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on. All those things are my hope for what can come of this.
Yeah.
And Carah, you do a fantastic job. Thanks for setting this up. And you are a talented interviewer, and it's fun to be able to be here and watch you do your stuff. So thank you for setting this up, for making this happen. I didn't have to arrange this. I didn't have to schedule it. I didn't even have to prep for it, although I tried to read the outline and be prepped. But you're great. You're great, Carah, and you do a great job. And thank you for helping carry the load, because it's nice to have people who are helping to carry it.
Well, thank you. And I want to be able to tell as many stories as we can. And if, it's difficult for John to schedule so many, and I want to get people in here telling many diverse and different stories as possible. And it's only when I become a little bit painfully aware whenever John talks. And I was like, that's a great point. I could just listen to John talk all day. I wonder how many other people are feeling that way too. And that I was sitting over there and he's over there and he's over here.
For the record, I very much enjoyed having you interview me.
I wasn't looking for compliments, McKay, but I will take that. But John, you add so much good, clinical psychology perspective that I always love. And I think it always brings really good context to the things that our guests come on and bring and talk about. And so thank you for that little post wrap up of how important talking about these subjects are. Because yes, we do talk about the really, obvious problems with the church's LGBTQ issues and racism and sexism. But just I think it's almost ubiquitous to a standard Mormon marriage experience is a spouse struggling with a porn addiction. Again, I'm putting that in quotes.
Yeah.
And the fallout and the church expecting that one spouse was always just kind of reigning over the other one, checking in, policing their sexuality, and just kind of calling that culture out, those expectations out in the church for what they are. That is just toxic to growing, like John said, that could have been so much better, such a healthier marriage, and just kind of quite literally the breaking that caused so much devastation in your life. And again, that makes me really sad and upset that culture is just so prominent.
Me too. Because as I said, I've seen it with a lot of other people and friends. So I hope that people hearing this will know that they're not alone in those experiences, and that change can come however long it may take. We just have to keep cracking away at it, right? So again, thank you guys for having me, and you both offered a lot of really good insights, I think. And yes, Carah, you do a fabulous job interviewing. So it's been great. I'm
now that when people compliment me like that, and I was okay, I gotta not screw it up anymore.
And let me just add a plug. Support these guys, everyone. Donate to Open Stories Foundation.
That'd be so great.
I got your back.
You watch it enough, What do we say at the end? That we want to obviously thank all of our donors. And John does this so much better than me. But John, you want me to do the wrap up? Okay, I'm doing it. We want to thank all of our donors to Mormon Stories. We cannot do any of this without our donors. We are completely 100% donor funded, which I think is incredible. That pays for John's salary, that we had enough, they had enough, I'm going to say we, to be able to hire me on, that we're able to attack more issues, get on the top of more stories, produce more content. John and I have been doing an extra live stream show that we just started weekly, and that just frees us up to be able to contact more guests, get people in here more, tell more stories. And we want to just completely give a huge shout out to our donors. And if you're not a Mormon Stories donor, no shade, but if you, if you benefit from this programming, don't feel guilty that you're not paying. But if you have a little bit of extra cash, COVID was hard on all of us. Totally understandable. But if you have a little bit of extra cash, you can go to mormonstories.org, click the button at the top, and you can become a one-time donor or a monthly donor for $10 a month, $20 a month, $50. Hey, you could even go a little bit crazy. And whenever we do live streams this isn't technically a live stream, but whenever we do live streams or whenever the video premieres, you can even do super chats through YouTube and throw a little bit of cash that helps go to this entire production. Like I was saying, our salaries, but also renting this space, paying for good equipment, paying for good sound, paying for hosting that has to go to all of this stuff. So none of this would happen without our donors. And then we also have, like I was saying earlier, about a Thrive event that's coming up. And if you don't know what Thrive is a fabulous kind of, I would call it a nonprofit for, John, what's the best way to describe Thrive? I don't want to mess it up because it's so important.
No, it's just our attempt to provide communities of support for people who have left Mormonism or other high demand religions. And so we're trying to put little face-to-face communities together, hold annual events or workshops or retreats, just to give people what they need to heal and grow and to build a new life once their Mormon and or Orthodox religious life has fallen apart. That's all.
I aspire to articulate it that well next time. But Thrive is incredible. We just did a Thrive Day for women a couple weeks ago that I hosted, and it was this incredible event that 800 women came out to. So we're doing one even bigger and better. 2,000 people, hopefully, will be in the Salt Palace. We have Sarah Edmondson from The Vow on HBO, and she was also in what was it called again? The NXIVM
cult. Yeah.
NXIVM cult. So she's kind of like the big keynote speaker, as well as Lance Armstrong.
All red.
Wow. We got Lance all red. Taking back your compliments already, gentlemen. I know. Oh gosh, Carah.
The natural mistake.
I know, especially at the end of the day. I'm so sorry, everyone. Lance Allred, who has been on Mormon Stories before, has a lot of incredible things to say. He's like a professional public speaker at this point, right? Like he talks about, what's the name of his book? The Redefining Masculinity?
The New Alpha.
New Alpha Male.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Lance Allred is coming to speak. We have Alan and Katie Mount from Marriage on a Tightrope podcast, Bill Reel, RFM, Latter-day Lesbians podcast, me with a bunch of other TikTok people that I mentioned earlier. McKay is going to be there, just like, handing out high fives and hugs, hopefully.
Yeah. I emailed them about getting a booth, but might have been too late, so.
Email them. Just give me a call. I'll hook you up.
Okay.
And John, who else am I forgetting?
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah.
I hope I didn't leave anyone else off the list. Is that the entire list?
No, there's others, but
there's others. Yeah. But all right.
Check it out. ThriveBeyondReligion.com. You can see the whole full group.
It's only
Luna Corbden.
Luna, Lindsay Corbden. ThriveBeyondReligion.com, $25. And it's going to be an incredible day, November 14th at the Salt Palace. And that's the entire post-show wrap-up. Again, thank you, McKay. Thanks, John, for writing Sidecar. And if you have any constructive criticism, comments, please email us at mormonstories.org. And thank you, everyone,
mormonstories@gmail.com. That's good. Good. She's doing it.
I'm like rushing
She's
so fast.
She's rocking it.
I'm not thinking. I'm sorry.
It's good.
All right. Well, all right. mormonstories@gmail.com.
Yep. You got it.
Oh, I need to go sleep for like 5 hours after this. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and tune in for another episode next time on Mormon Stories. I've been your host, Carah Burrell. Thanks, John. Thanks, McKay. Thanks, audience, for tuning in. Bye, everybody.
Bye.